Hi again the guys, and welcome to episode 43 of Quattroporte, the review series for Gran Turismo's selection of sports saloons or sedans and super saloons. Basically high performance vehicles ranging from the modest to the extreme of a four-door, generally executive nature. And in this particular pick we're featuring one of many different incarnations of the Mitsubishi Evo that's been featured on Gran Turismo, the latest and technically last version of the Evo, as it does not exist of course anymore. There is no Evo 11 planned, although if it ever does come back it'll probably be some form of performance hybrid. But that being said, that is of course speculation. This is the car that we have as the last version of the Evo. Now the final version was of course the FQ440, I believe it was, but this is not that car. This is the far more modest, not necessarily normal Evo, because no Evo is really normal, but it's nowhere near as extreme as the FQ400. You can tune it though, of course, and fully tuned it puts out a lot more power than an FQ400. 590 horsepower to be exact, so technically this is actually an FQ600. Now as far as torque, that 2-litre turbo puts out 482 foot-pounds, which is pretty decent to say the least, and it only weighs 1,232 kilos, which is only 2 kilos heavier than the WRC rally car. As far as horsepower per tonne, it's not as high as some, because the power is considerably lower than many of the European super saloons, as is not really surprising from the Evos and Imprezas. They're not really as powerful on Gran Turismo as they deserve to be, which is kind of ironic, given that it is a Japanese game. So horsepower per tonne is just under 480. As far as PP, it sits at 572, which is reasonable. It's not overly high, but at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily recommend using it at that level against most opposition, because at that level you can get some pretty amazing cars, and the Evo, although very good in real life, doesn't really have the same impact on Gran Turismo as it does in the real world, and neither does the Impreza really, for that matter. They're good cars on the game, they just don't really have the range to take on many of the other super saloons or other performance cars apart from four doors. They're not bad, they're great rally cars of course, but there's something about the handling to some degree of the cars, and also the lack of the deserved power, that kind of hinders them. Now the Evo 10 is not necessarily a softer Evo, but it's certainly more beginner friendly. It's more forgiving than other Evos. That was typically more the Subaru Impreza trait, that it was easier to drive and more forgiving, whereas the Evo was the more hardcore, professional focused vehicle. Both being very good of course, but with the Subaru, I personally get the feeling at least that it was a little bit easier to drive, a little bit more forgiving. This car kind of did that to the Evo. It's easier to drive, it is more forgiving, it has a more softer, rounded image. A good looking car for sure, but completely different to any Evo before. So has that hindered it? Well, the weight is higher than some of the other Evos, but it's still not overly heavy, so it hasn't really hindered it in that regard too much. As far as its performance, it is still a good car. The top speed is around the same kind of level that you'd expect from the Evo 9 or the Evo 8. That's around 225, 230 miles per hour. So it's not bad by any means. The acceleration off the line, especially with NOS, can be incredibly quick, and the handling is good. It's just, when you're taking on vehicles like the Nissan GTR, the Tommy Kaira ZZ2, and to be honest, even vehicles that aren't those known OP vehicles, stuff like the BMW M5, the Mercedes C63, even within the saloon class, the Evo will struggle against those cars on a wide array of tracks. Now if you put them on a rally track, obviously they don't stand a chance against an Evo. But rally tracks don't play that big a role on Gran Turismo 6 as they have on previous games. Now that's a shame, but it's also a fact. So the range of use for the Evo is kind of out of its comfort zone, and I think that's one of the reasons why it doesn't feel as effective as it could. And that's a shame, because there are certainly a lot of fans of the Evo and the Impreza, and the main thing that they're designed for, the whole purpose really, is for rallying. So when you can't use them for that for the most part, it does feel kind of like a fish out of water. They're good on road circuits for sure, but they just don't have that top-end power and performance. The low-end speed is good, the handling is good for twisty circuits especially, but they're just not 7, 8, 900 horsepower machines, and without that kind of power, they just don't stand a chance on a higher speed track. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be an absolute top speed track like Route X. It could even be Le Mans, the Nürburgring Ring, to be honest. Other tracks like Monza or Spa, the Evo will struggle. Now with nearly 600 horsepower, it's still quick, and I'm not saying this is a bad car by any means. With a price tag of 42 grand, it's very good value, and I'd definitely recommend buying one and checking it out, being as it is also a premium with some body modifications, etc. that you'd expect to come with that. Just, I would say, don't expect too much of the Evo on GT6, because like the Impreza and some others, it is a legend, and for good reason. But like some other legends on Gran Turismo, it's not really given the due that it deserves. It's not as effective as it should be, or as it is in real life, and if you do plan to use it in competition form, just be selective about where you use it, because it definitely has potential, but it's not an all-conquering monster in GT6. But that's it overall for this particular episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.